Welcome back to Secrets Exposed. It's always a pleasure to have you with us. You're the reason these stories worth sharing. Tell us where you're watching from, city or country. We're amazed by how far these tales reach. To get daily new and amazing stories for you, subscribe our channel and press bell icon. All right, let's begin. The desert night was suffocating. Heat still radiated from the cracked earth, though the sun had set hours ago. Dust hung in the air like smoke, clinging to sweat and skin. In the ruins of an abandoned village, Sergeant Kalen Stravic crouched behind a wall that had been blasted in half. His rifle rested against his knee, his breathing steady, his eyes scanning shadows for movement. Around him, his unit waited in silence. The distant echo of gunfire rattled now and then, carried by the dry wind. But for the moment, the front line was still. The men sat hunched in the dirt, tension etched on every face. They trusted Kalen. He was the soldier who never wavered, the one who always kept his head even when bullets screamed past. But tonight, everything would change. The radio on Kalen's chest hissed with sudden static. His head tilted sharply, his hand reaching instinctively to adjust the dial. He expected coordinates, a mission update, maybe in order to advance. Instead, a voice came through, shaken, urgent, carrying weight no soldier ever wanted to hear. Sergeant Stravic, priority message. It's about your daughter. Kalen's breath caught in his throat. His men looked up instantly, eyes darting toward him, knowing the battlefield had just shifted into something far more dangerous. The voice pressed on, breaking against the crackle of interference. She's in ICU. Critical condition. Cracked skull. Multiple bruised ribs. The words shattered him like shrapnel. Kalen froze, his grip tightening on the radio until his knuckles turned white. His daughter. His Aloan. A soldier could take bullets, bombs, fire. But this pierced deeper. His pulse roared in his ears, drowning out everything else. Repeat that, he whispered, but the desperation in his voice wasn't like him. It wasn't the command of a sergeant. It was the plea of a father. And then, through the static, another voice broke through. Softer, fragile, trembling with pain. That hurts. Kalen's body stiffened. His eyes widened, disbelief clawing at him. It was her. It was Aloan. His little girl's voice carried across miles of desert, bleeding through the radio. His men stared, stunned into silence, as the soldier they knew as unbreakable crumbled in front of them. Mom's man, she whispered, every word weak, broken by sobs. He left me in the shed. I couldn't breathe. Dad, please. The radio went dead. Only static remained. Kalen dropped his rifle. His chest rose and fell in quick, shallow bursts, as if the air itself had betrayed him. He slammed his hand against the dirt, swallowing back a roar that burned at the edge of his throat. His little girl had been begging for him while he crouched in foreign sand, chasing shadows of enemies that suddenly meant nothing. The squad leader, Captain Jareth Kaler, stepped closer, his brow furrowed, his voice sharp. Stravic, what the hell is going on? Kalen turned toward him, and for the first time, Jareth saw fear in his sergeant's eyes. Fear and something darker, rage simmering beneath the surface. His lips parted, but no words came. Jareth snatched the headset from him. HQ, this is Captain Kaler. Confirm. What's happening with Stravic's kid? The voice on the other end didn't hesitate. Confirmed. Victim is Aloan Kaylees, female, 8 years old. Currently in ICU. Doctors say her chances are slipping. Injuries suggest abuse. Alleged suspect, her mother's partner. Name, Alaric Dravorn. The silence that followed was heavier than gunfire. Jareth looked at Kalen, saw his fists clenching so tightly his gloves creaked. Then Jareth barked into the radio. This mission is over. Do you hear me? Over. Get a Black Hawk in the air. Sergeant Stravic is going home. Now. He threw the radio back at Kalen, grabbing his shoulder, shaking him once hard. Go. Don't waste another second. Get to her. Kalen didn't speak. Couldn't. He just nodded once, his face stone, though tears blurred his vision. His rifle hung abandoned against the wall. He pushed off the dirt, legs burning as he ran toward the landing zone, every step fueled by fury. The sound came first, a low thunder building into a roar. The Black Hawk descended from the darkness, blades cutting the night, dust blasting up around him in violent circles. Kalen climbed aboard without looking back. His men saluted as the chopper lifted, carrying him away. The desert shrank beneath him, swallowed by shadows. He gripped the seat, jaw set, eyes unblinking. Inside his chest, only one thought pounded, over and over like a drumbeat of war. He left her in the shed, and Kalen Stravik was coming home. The helicopter blades still echoed in Kalen's ears as the wheels of the transport plane screeched against the runway. Dawn hadn't yet broken, but the city lights shimmered faintly in the distance like a world he hadn't seen in years. Kalen didn't wait for clearance. He stormed off the ramp before it lowered, duffel bag slung across his shoulder, boots striking the asphalt with the rhythm of a war drum. Every step toward the hospital pulled him deeper into a reality worse than any battlefield. A soldier knows where the enemy hides. But here, the enemy had a face he couldn't yet place. Inside the ICU, the air was thick with antiseptic and tension. Machines beeped in steady rhythm, each sound a reminder that Alohan's life hung by threads of wires and tubes. Doctors moved swiftly around her bed, their faces drawn tight with focus. Kalen pushed through them until he reached her side. His breath caught. Alohan lay motionless, her small body bruised and pale against the stark white sheets. Her hair clung damply to her forehead. A bandage circled her head where the fracture had been treated. Her ribs rose and fell shallowly, each breath a fragile battle. "Daddy," the word was a ghost of a sound, but it split him open. Her eyelids fluttered, revealing glassy eyes that searched for him. Despite the pain, she managed the faintest smile. "You came." Kalen's chest broke. He dropped to his knees, his large hand wrapping gently around hers, dwarfed but steady. His head lowered, and for a moment, the soldier was gone. Only a father remained, trembling, whispering, "I'll never let anyone hurt you again. I promise." Behind them, a nurse adjusted the monitors, then glanced sideways at a woman sitting rigid in the corner. Muriel Crestfall, Alohan's mother, Kalen's ex-wife. Muriel's eyes were red, mascara smeared down her cheeks. She wrung her hands in her lap, a tissue crumpled between trembling fingers. To anyone else, she looked like a grieving mother barely holding herself together. But the nurse noticed what Kalen couldn't. Muriel's gaze wasn't fixed on Alohan. It darted to Kalen, then away again, filled with unease. Kalen finally rose, turning to face her. His voice was gravel. "What happened?" Muriel's lips parted, then faltered. She fell. Out back, hit her head on the ground. I found her too late." Her story crumbled beneath Kalen's stare. He knew when someone was lying. He'd interrogated prisoners, read enemies' eyes. And right now his gut screamed, "Don't lie to me." His voice was low, dangerous. "She told me herself." He left her in the shed. Muriel froze. Her knuckles whitened around the tissue. For a split second, her mask slipped. Something flickered in her eyes. Fear, not of Alohan's injuries, but of being exposed. Before Kalen could press, a firm voice cut through the tension. "Sergeant Stravik?" A tall man in a dark coat stepped into the room. Detective Corvin Malrick. His presence was calm, but his eyes missed nothing. He flipped open a notebook, his pen poised. "I need to ask some questions." Kalen turned sharply. "Later. She needs me now." Corvin's voice was even. "And she needs you to know the truth. If what your daughter said is true, then this wasn't an accident. It was abuse. And we don't have much time to lock this down before evidence vanishes." Kalen's jaw tightened. He looked back at Alohan, who drifted into restless sleep, her small hand still gripping his. His heart screamed to stay by her side. But his soldier's mind, the one that lived on discipline and urgency, knew Corvin was right. He glanced once more at Muriel. She avoided his eyes, clutching her tissue like a shield. And in that avoidance, Kalen saw the shadow of truth. She knew more than she was saying. "Fine," Kalen muttered. "Talk." Corvin stepped closer, lowering his voice. The doctors confirmed those injuries weren't consistent with a fall. The bruising, the confinement signs. She was locked somewhere small, and your daughter already gave us the detail, the shed. We'll need to verify, but right now I need you steady, because this case, it's going to tear open more than you expect. Kaylin's eyes hardened, locked on Muriel. She shifted uncomfortably under his glare, mumbling excuses that sounded thinner with every word. And as the machines beeped steadily beside Aloan, the war Kaylin thought he'd left behind began again. This time, inside the walls of his own family. The waiting room was silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional squeak of shoes across the polished hospital floor. Kaylin sat stiffly in a plastic chair, his elbows on his knees, his fists pressed against his forehead. His combat uniform was still streaked with desert dust, a stark contrast to the sterile white walls around him. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard Aloan's broken whisper replay. He left me in the shed. It wasn't just a sentence. It was a wound. Detective Corvin Maurick leaned against the wall across from him, flipping his notebook shut. He studied Kaylin for a long moment before speaking. She's stable for now, but you know how fragile she is. The doctors can only do so much. Kaylin lifted his head slowly, his eyes bloodshot. Who is he? Corvin's jaw tightened. Alaric Dravorn, your ex-wife's partner. Charming on the outside, but his records muddy. A string of jobs he never held for long. Debt that doesn't add up. And neighbors have heard shouting, doors slamming. But no one ever called it in. Until now. Kaylin's fists clenched tighter. His voice was low, dangerous. Where is he? Corvin paused, measuring him. You're not hearing me. We're still investigating. If you storm in now. Kaylin shot up, the chair screeching across the tiles. His frame towered over the detective. He put my daughter in ICU. He locked her in a shed like an animal. You expect me to sit here? Muriel, who had been sitting quietly at the far end of the room, suddenly stood. Kaylin, please, don't make this worse. Alaric didn't mean to. The room froze. Corvin's eyes snapped to her. Didn't mean to what? Muriel's face drained of color. I just meant, he has a temper. He gets frustrated, but he loves Aloan. Kaylin's voice cut through her excuses like steel. He loves her. She's hooked up to machines, because of him. He stepped closer, his stare drilling into her. And you're still protecting him. Muriel's lips trembled. She looked at Corvin, then away, unable to hold either man's gaze. Her silence spoke louder than any denial. Corvin's pen scratched across the page of his notebook. That's enough for now. I'll get a warrant started. He straightened, closing the notebook with finality. Stravik, I know you want to act, but if you confront him alone, you risk more than your own career. You risk losing her, custody, visitation, everything. Let us do this right. But Kaylin's mind was no longer in the waiting room. Images of Alaric filled his head, smirking, dismissive, treating Aloan's pain like nothing. He imagined the shed, cold and dark, his daughter pounding on the door while Alaric walked away. No soldier could watch that enemy walk free. He turned back toward Aloan's room, peering through the glass at her small body. Machines beeped rhythmically, but her hand twitched slightly, as if fighting to reach him even in her sleep. That tiny motion hardened his resolve. Kaylin whispered under his breath, I'm not waiting. Corvin caught it. His eyes narrowed. Don't do anything reckless. But Kaylin had already decided. That night, after Aloan drifted into deeper rest, Kaylin left the hospital. The air outside was heavy, clouds blotting out the stars. He pulled his hood up, his boots crunching against the wet pavement. Alaric Dravorn's house wasn't far. A quiet suburban street, lights dim in most windows. From a distance, Kaylin saw it, porch light glowing, curtains drawn. The house looked ordinary, peaceful, but inside lived the man who had broken his daughter. Kaylin stood in the shadows across the street, watching. His chest rose and fell in slow, deliberate breaths. He could storm the house now, tear the door off its hinges. But a soldier didn't rush blind. He waited, studied, planned. Through the window, movement flickered. A man's silhouette, broad-shouldered, pacing with a drink in his hand. Alaric. Kaylin's jaw tightened, his knuckles flexing at his sides. The war wasn't overseas anymore. It was here, in the streets he once called home. And Kalen Stravik was ready to fight it. Rain slicked the streets, pooling into black mirrors under the streetlights. Kalen stood in the shadows across from Alaric Dravorn's house, his hood pulled low, his pulse steady but burning. Through the glass, Alaric's silhouette shifted back and forth. A tumbler of whiskey glimmered in his hand as he paced, muttering to himself. Kalen's fists curled. Every nerve screamed to kick down the door. But years of training held him still. Soldiers never rushed blind. He studied. He waited. He watched. Finally, when the silence of the night pressed too heavily, Kalen moved. His boots carried him across the street. One step, another. The sound of rain masked his approach. He reached the porch, stood before the door, and for a moment, just one moment, he hesitated. This wasn't an enemy outpost. This was a home. His daughter's prison. He lifted his fist and pounded once. The door swung open almost instantly, as if Alaric had been expecting him. "Well," Alaric drawled, leaning against the frame. His shirt was half unbuttoned, the glass still in his hand. A smug grin played across his lips. The soldier finally crawls home. Kalen's voice was gravel. "You hurt my daughter." Alaric chuckled, swirling his drink. "Your daughter? Funny. You left her behind. I was the one putting food on the table. Maybe it was a little rough, but kids need discipline." Kalen surged forward, grabbing him by the collar, slamming him against the door frame so hard the wood cracked. "You call locking a child in a shed discipline?" His voice trembled with rage. "She's 8 years old." For a moment, Alaric's smugness faltered. Then, chillingly, he smirked again. "You think this is about me? You really don't get it, do you?" Kalen froze, his grip tightening. "What are you talking about?" Before Alaric could answer, headlights flared across the street. A car pulled up. Out stepped Detective Corvin Maurick, coat collar raised against the rain. His voice cut through the tension. "Stravik, let him go." Kalen snarled, his body trembling with the urge to crush Alaric where he stood. But Corvin's voice was sharp, commanding. "Do it now, or you'll hand him exactly what he wants." Reluctantly, Kalen shoved Alaric back inside and released him. Alaric straightened his shirt, brushing off the dust, still smiling that infuriating smile. Corvin entered, his eyes scanning the scene. "Alaric Dravorn, you're under investigation for child endangerment. Don't get comfortable." Alaric raised his glass in mock salute. "Investigation? Huh? You'll find nothing that sticks. She's clumsy, that kid. Always getting into trouble. Convenient, isn't it, blaming me?" Kalen lunged again, but Corvin intercepted him, shoving a hand against his chest. "Don't. Not here. Not yet." Kalen's eyes burned into Alaric. "She told me herself. You locked her in the shed." For the first time, Alaric's smile vanished. His eyes narrowed. "She talked." The words slipped out before he could stop them. His smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of panic. Corvin's pen was already scratching across his notebook. "That's enough confirmation for me." Alaric cursed under his breath, pacing away. Then he turned, his face twisting. "You think you're the hero, soldier boy? You left her with me. You left her to this. That makes you just as guilty." The words hit Kalen like shrapnel. His chest heaved, rage and guilt colliding until he could barely breathe. Corvin stepped forward, his tone even but laced with warning. "Stravik, walk out that door. Now, if you stay, this ends with blood, and that's what he wants." Kalen's jaw trembled. Every part of him screamed to end it here. But he saw Alohan's face in his mind, pale and fragile in her hospital bed. If he acted now, recklessly, he could lose her forever. Not to death, but to the system that would see him as dangerous. Slowly, Kalen turned, stepping out into the rain. Alaric's laughter followed him, cold and triumphant. As the door shut behind them, Corvin spoke low. "He's hiding something bigger. That arrogance? That slip? He's not afraid of us. Not because he's innocent, because he thinks someone's protecting him." Kalen stopped in the street, rain dripping from his hood. His fists clenched at his sides. "Then we find out who." And for the first time, the war Kalen thought was against one man began to shift towards something darker. Something he couldn't yet name. The rain hadn't stopped. It followed Kalen back to the hospital, tapping against the tall glass windows like an impatient hand. He pushed through the revolving doors, his boots leaving a trail of water on the polished floor. Inside, the ICU wing glowed with harsh fluorescent light. The air smelled of antiseptic and fear. Nurses moved briskly, whispering updates in clipped tones. Kalen ignored them all. His eyes were fixed on the small figure visible through the glass panel of room 214. Aloan lay still beneath the sheets, machines humming at her side. A faint light blinked with each fragile heartbeat. Kalen pressed his palm against the glass, his reflection merging with hers. He had fought battles across deserts and mountains, but nothing had left him so powerless as the sight of his daughter lying there. Behind him, a voice broke the silence. "You confronted him, didn't you?" Kalen turned. Muriel Crestfall stood in the corridor, her arms folded tight against her chest. Her eyes were rimmed with red, but her stance was rigid, defensive. "You knew," Kalen said flatly. Her lips parted, then closed again. She looked away, focusing on the floor tiles as if answers might be written there. "You don't understand." Kalen stepped closer, his presence towering. "Don't lie to me again. You protected him." Muriel flinched, her voice cracking. He's all I have now. I didn't think he'd hurt her this badly." The words struck Kalen like ice. "You didn't think?" His voice dropped to a whisper, colder than any shout. "She's 8 years old, Muriel. You chose him over her." Before Muriel could reply, Detective Corvin Maurik approached. His notepad was already open, his tone clipped. "Interesting. Because earlier you said she fell, and now you're admitting you knew Alaric was involved. Which is it?" Muriel's face paled. She fumbled for words, but Corvin cut her off. "I'll tell you which it is. It's obstruction. And if your daughter dies, it's accessory." Kalen's chest heaved with rage. He wanted to shake the truth out of her, force her to admit what she'd done. But Corvin's steady presence held him back. The detective was building something larger than anger. A case. "Where is he now?" Corvin asked sharply. Muriel hesitated. "Home. He said he'd wait. He said nothing would stick to him." Corvin scribbled the words. "That's a dangerous kind of confidence. People like Alaric only feel untouchable if someone's covering their tracks." Kalen's jaw tightened. "You think someone else is involved?" Corvin met his gaze. "I think this is bigger than a temper. People who hurt children this way, it's rarely just impulse. It's control. It's leverage." Muriel's voice wavered. "Stop it. You don't know him." Kalen spun toward her, fury breaking through his restraint. "Then tell me who he really is." Because Aloan said shed. Not accident. Not fall. Shed. He left her there to die. The corridor went silent. Muriel pressed her hands to her face, sobbing into her palms. But even through her tears, Kalen saw it. She wasn't just grieving. She was hiding. Corvin placed a hand on Kalen's shoulder, grounding him. "Stay with your daughter. I'll dig into Alaric's connections. If he's as confident, he has help." He glanced sharply at Muriel. "And I'll find out who's feeding him that confidence." Muriel lowered her hands slowly, her expression unreadable. For a flicker of a second, her eyes met Kalen's, and he swore he saw guilt, thick and heavy, flicker across her face. Kalen turned back to the glass. Aloan stirred faintly, her tiny chest rising and falling under the weight of machines. He pressed his forehead to the cold panel. "Hang on, baby girl," he whispered. "I'm not leaving you again." Behind him, Muriel slipped into a chair, her posture folding inward. Corvin walked away, his coat swaying, his pen scribbling furiously. And in that moment, the war lines shifted again. Kalen knew Alaric wasn't the only enemy. There was something darker threading through this nightmare. And Muriel Crestfall, his once beloved, now estranged wife, was no longer just a bystander. The hospital corridor was quiet, but Kalen Stravik's mind was a battlefield. He sat beside Aloan's bed, her small hand wrapped in his eyes fixed on the steady green line that danced across the heart monitor. Each beep felt like a fragile victory. Each pause between was an eternity. The door creaked open. Detective Corvin Maurik stepped inside, his coat damp from the rain. He closed the door softly, lowering his voice. I've been digging into Alaric Dravorn, Corvin said, flipping open his notebook. What I found doesn't line up. On paper, he's broke, lost jobs, debt collectors chasing him. But in the last 6 months, there's been a sudden cash flow. Large deposits. Clean. Almost too clean. Kalen frowned. Where's it coming from? Corvin's gaze shifted, landing briefly on Muriel Crestfall, who sat stiffly in the corner of the room. She hadn't spoken since earlier, her eyes swollen from crying or pretending to. That's what I'm trying to confirm, Corvin continued. But if I had to guess, someone close. Someone with a reason to keep him comfortable. Muriel flinched, her fingers tightening around the tissue in her lap. Kalen's voice hardened. Say it. You think she's paying him? Corvin didn't answer directly. Instead, he studied Muriel. You told me Alaric didn't mean to lock Aloan in that shed. That slip wasn't just nerves. It was knowledge. You knew he did it. You just didn't want to admit how much you already knew. Muriel's face blanched. She shook her head quickly. No, you don't understand. It's not what you think. I couldn't manage everything. Alaric said he'd help. He promised. Kalen's hand slammed the rail of Aloan's bed, the metal rattling. Promised? He nearly killed her. What did he promise you, Muriel? Money? Custody? What? Her eyes filled with tears. You left us, she snapped suddenly, her voice cracking. You left me to raise her alone while you played soldier in another desert. Do you know how hard it was? Do you know what it felt like, watching her look for you every night and cry when you weren't there? The word struck Kalen, sharp and unexpected. For a moment, guilt carved through his anger. He saw Aloan's bruised body and thought of the years he'd been absent, deployments, missions, nights spent half a world away. Muriel's voice was broken, but her bitterness was real. Still, Corvin wasn't moved. His eyes were steel. That doesn't explain the money. And it doesn't explain why you let a man like Alaric near your daughter. Muriel wiped her cheeks, her voice trembling. I didn't know he'd hurt her. I thought if she hated Kalen enough, if she saw him as the one who abandoned her, then maybe she'd stop crying for him. Maybe she'd need me more. The room went silent. Kalen's breath caught. He stared at her, stunned. You use her pain? His voice was hoarse, disbelieving. You let him twist her life, just so she'd hate me? Muriel's shoulders sagged. She buried her face in her hands, sobbing. I didn't want it to go this far. Kalen staggered back, gripping the edge of the bed for support. The world tilted, the hospital walls pressing in around him. He had expected Alaric's cruelty. But this, Muriel's confession, raw and trembling, was something darker. Corvin's pen scratched across the page. His voice was low, deliberate. This isn't full yet, but it's enough. Enough to put pressure on Alaric. Enough to corner him. And when men like him are cornered, they talk. Kalen turned, his eyes burning holes into Muriel. If she talks again, he whispered, nodding toward Aloan, it'll be to tell me how safe she feels. Not how much she's been hurt. You owe her that. Not me her. Muriel sobbed harder, but Kalen didn't look at her again. His attention was only for Aloan, her fragile breaths like threads pulling him back from collapse. Corvin slipped his notebook shut. I'll bring him in. But Stravik, brace yourself. If she's telling the truth, even partly, then the man you thought was just cruel? He was never acting alone. The detective left, his footsteps echoing down the hall. Kalen leaned close to Aloan, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. His voice was a whisper of vow. I'm here now. No one will ever lock you away again. But even as he spoke, his chest tightened. The enemy wasn't just Alaric anymore. It wasn't even just Muriel. Something deeper coiled beneath it all. And Kalen knew the war was only beginning. The steady beeping of the heart monitor suddenly changed. The sharp, rhythmic tone faltered, skipping, then racing. Kalen shot upright from the chair beside Aloan's bed, his pulse slamming into overdrive. Aloan, he whispered, gripping her tiny hand. Her eyelids fluttered, her chest rising in shallow, uneven breaths. Nurses burst into the room, the air filling with a rush of urgency. She's crashing. Get the crash cart, one shouted. Another shoved Kalen back, her voice firm. You need to step out. Kalen's chest tightened, every instinct screaming to fight, to stay. But his body wouldn't move. He stumbled into the hallway, his palms pressed against the glass as he watched a storm of doctors and nurses surround his daughter. "Stay with me, baby girl," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Stay with me." Behind him, footsteps echoed. Detective Corvin Malrick appeared, his expression grave. He glanced through the glass at the chaos, then back at Kaylin. "What happened?" Kaylin's voice was a rasp. She was fine. She was holding on. Then suddenly, he broke off, unable to finish. A nurse rushed out, sweat on her brow. "We stabilized her, but she's fragile. Any stress, any sudden trigger, it could push her over again." Her eyes flicked between Kaylin and Corvin. "She needs calm. She needs safety." Corvin's jaw tightened. Safety, she doesn't have. Not while he's still out there. Kaylin's gaze snapped to him. "Alaric." Corvin nodded slowly. "We put a team on him, but he's not stupid. He knows we're circling. He's watching us as much as we're watching him." Kaylin's fists clenched. "Then let me go to him." Corvin shook his head. "If you do that, Stravik, you'll hand him control. He wants you angry. He wants you reckless. He's the kind of man who only wins if you destroy yourself first." Kaylin turned back to the glass. Eloan lay still, pale and fragile, machines keeping her tethered to life. His reflection in the window looked like a stranger, battle-worn, hollow-eyed, desperate. The door creaked. Muriel Crestfall stepped out of the room, her face streaked with tears. She wouldn't meet Kaylin's eyes. She almost didn't make it. "Kaylin, what if she—" "Don't," Kaylin snapped, his voice sharp. His anger boiled over. "Don't you dare say her name like you've protected her. You brought him into her life." Muriel's lips trembled. "I made a mistake. I didn't think he'd—" Kaylin cut her off, stepping closer, his voice low and lethal. "A mistake is forgetting to lock a door. A mistake is leaving the oven on. You handed our daughter to a man who put her in the ICU. That's not a mistake. That's betrayal." Muriel's tears spilled, but she said nothing more. She folded into herself, collapsing into a chair in the corner of the hall. Corvin's phone buzzed. He answered sharply. His face darkened as he listened. When he hung up, his tone was grim. "He knows we're closing in. He's not hiding. He's taunting." Kaylin's chest heaved. "What do you mean?" Corvin met his eyes. He showed up at the station, walked in smiling, said he wanted to clear his name. Then he left. No lawyer, no fear. Like he's untouchable. Kaylin's rage ignited. He almost killed her, and he walks free? Corvin held his gaze. Not free. Cornered animals behave like kings until the cage shuts. He knows we don't have enough to pin him yet, but he's daring us to try. Kaylin's nails dug into his palms. "Then I'll do what you can't." Corvin stepped closer, his voice sharp. "Don't. Not if you want your daughter to wake up with a father at her side, instead of hearing you're behind bars." For a long moment, Kaylin said nothing. His chest rose and fell in heavy bursts, every muscle in his body taut with restraint. Then, slowly, he turned back to the glass, his hand pressing against it. Eloan's chest lifted weakly beneath the sheets, each breath fragile but present. His eyes burned. "She's all that matters," he whispered. "If he even comes near this hospital." Corvin nodded. "We'll be ready." But as the detective walked away, Kaylin's gut told him the truth. Alaric wasn't done. He wasn't finished tormenting them. And the next move wouldn't come in a courtroom. It would come here, where Eloan lay fighting for her life. The hospital was supposed to feel safe. Sterile walls, locked wards, security guards at the entrance. Yet Kaylin Stravik couldn't shake the gnawing sense that Alaric Dravorn was already inside. It started with the flowers. That morning, when Kaylin stepped into Eloan's room, a vase of bright lilies sat on the nightstand. Too fresh. Too perfect. He froze, his pulse hammering. The nurse said they'd been delivered for the little fighter, no sender's name. Kaylin's jaw clenched. He touched the card tucked between the stems. Just 3 words, written in looping handwriting that chilled him. "Sheds are dark." His grip tightened until the card crumpled. Rage burned through him, but he kept his face still. Eloan's fragile breaths filled the room, her monitors steady. She couldn't see his fear. Behind him, the door creaked. Muriel Crestfall stood there, her eyes flicking to the flowers. She froze for half a second, too long. Kalen caught it. "You know who sent these?" he said flatly. Muriel shook her head too quickly. I don't. It could be anyone." Kalen stepped closer, his voice low and lethal. "Stop lying. He's taunting me." "Taunting her. And you let him." Tears welled in Muriel's eyes. "Kalen, please. I never wanted this." But Kalen's stare was unrelenting. He saw the guilt, the hesitation, the cracks widening. Something in Muriel's silence told him what Corvin had suspected. Alaric's arrogance came from somewhere deeper. From her. Before Kalen could press further, Detective Corvin Malrick entered, his coat damp with rain. He saw the flowers immediately, his face hardening. "Get those out," he ordered the nurse. He turned to Kalen. "We've confirmed it. Alaric's accounts. He's been receiving deposits. Regular, consistent. Not random gifts." Kalen's voice was sharp. "From her." He jerked his chin at Muriel. Corvin didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence was heavier than words. Muriel broke, her voice trembling. I didn't think he'd actually hurt her. He said it was only to make her stronger, to show she didn't need you." Kalen's fists shook at his sides. "Make her stronger?" His voice cracked with fury. He locked her in a shed. "Muriel." He broke her ribs. Muriel's sobs filled the room, but Kalen wasn't listening anymore. The soldier in him wanted to march straight to Alaric's door and end it. But the father in him knew every step had to be careful for Alohan's sake. Corvin's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his jaw tightening. "Stravik, we got a problem. Alaric isn't hiding anymore. He's here." Kalen's eyes snapped up. "What do you mean here?" Corvin's voice was grim. "Hospital lobby. Sitting on a bench. Smiling at the cameras." The words detonated in Kalen's chest. He stormed toward the door, but Corvin blocked him. "No. If you go down there now, you'll give him exactly what he wants, a soldier out of control. He'll walk free, and you'll lose Alohan in more ways than one." Kalen's fists trembled, his breath ragged. Through the glass, he saw Alohan stir faintly, her lips parting as though searching for him even in sleep. His resolve cracked, but his rage only deepened. Muriel's voice cut through the silence, weak and breaking. "He said you'd snap, that you'd destroy yourself before the truth came out." Kalen turned sharply, his eyes narrowing. "What truth?" Muriel froze. Her lips parted, but no words came. She backed into the corner, her body folding inward, as if the walls themselves were closing in on her. Corvin's gaze sharpened. She knows more, but she's not ready to give it up. Not yet. He looked at Kalen, steady. "You need to hold the line. Let me handle Alaric." But Kalen's blood boiled. Alaric was downstairs, smiling, while Alohan lay broken upstairs. And Muriel, her silence screamed complicity. Kalen leaned close to the glass, his forehead pressing against the cold surface as he whispered to his unconscious daughter. "I'll protect you, whatever it takes." Downstairs, Alaric Dravorn sat comfortably in the hospital lobby, legs crossed, hands folded, eyes fixed on the security camera. His lips curved into a smile that wasn't meant for strangers. It was meant for Kalen, and the war had officially entered Kalen's last sanctuary. The hospital lobby hummed with muted voices and the clatter of footsteps. Families waited with flowers. Doctors hurried past with charts. Security guards leaned against the walls pretending to look relaxed. And in the middle of it all sat Alaric Dravorn. He leaned back on the vinyl bench, his leg crossed over his knee, flipping idly through a newspaper he hadn't bothered to read. The overhead light glinted off his smug grin. Every so often, he glanced at the security camera, lifting his glass of water as if to toast the man he knew was watching. Upstairs, Kalen Stravik stared at the monitor screen in the security room. His fists were clenched so tight his knuckles were white, his breath coming in sharp bursts. "He's mocking me," he growled. Detective Corvin Malrick stood beside him, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. "That's the point. He wants you to snap. If you put your hands on him here, you'll be the one in cuffs, not him." Kalen's jaw flexed. "He put my daughter in ICU. And now he walks into her hospital like it's a stage." Corvin's gaze didn't leave the screen. "Yes, which means he's desperate. He's pushing because he knows we're closing in. Before Kalen could respond, the radio on the desk crackled. Security to ICU floor. Unidentified male tried to access restricted wing. Kalen froze. His blood ran cold. He didn't wait for permission. He bolted from the room, Corvin on his heels. The elevator ride felt endless. Kalen's pulse thundered with each passing second. When the doors finally slid open, he sprinted down the corridor and stopped dead. Two guards were struggling to restrain Alaric at the end of the hall. His shirt was half torn, his voice mocking as he laughed, even while pinned. Just wanted to see the girl. What's the harm in saying hello? Kalen's vision tunneled. Rage erupted. He charged, slamming into Alaric so hard the guard stumbled back. His fist cracked against Alaric's jaw, sending the man sprawling to the floor. Kalen! Corvin barked, pulling at his shoulder, but Kalen didn't hear. He straddled Alaric, fists raining down, years of soldierly discipline obliterated by raw fury. You locked her in the dark, he roared, every punch fueled by Alohan's broken voice. You left her to die. Blood splattered across the tiles. Nurses screamed. The beeping of monitors from down the hall spiked as Alohan's room filled with alarm. Stravik, stop! Corvin's voice thundered. He wrestled Kalen back, shoving him against the wall. Look at her! He pointed toward the glass window of Alohan's room. Inside, doctors were rushing to stabilize her again. The chaos had reached her. Kalen froze. His fists hung in the air, trembling. He turned, his heart shattering at the sight of his daughter, convulsing under the machines. His rage drained into horror. Alaric coughed blood onto the floor, then laughed through swollen lips. See? He's unstable. He's a danger to her. You'll never get custody now. The word struck Kalen like a blade. For a moment, his knees buckled. Everything he fought for, every promise whispered at Alohan's bedside, threatened to vanish in a single outburst. Corvin barked orders to the guards. Get him out of here. Now. The guards dragged Alaric away, his laughter echoing down the corridor like nails against glass. Kalen slumped against the wall, his chest heaving, his hands dripping with the man's blood. He looked through the glass at Alohan, pale and fragile, fighting for breath. The realization clawed at him. Alaric hadn't come to win. He'd come to make Kalen lose himself. Corvin knelt beside him, his voice quieter now, but firm. He's playing you, and you almost gave him everything. Don't let him win again. Kalen's head dropped into his hands. The soldier in him knew Corvin was right, but the father in him was unraveling. His daughter's life hung by a thread, and the man responsible still walked with a smirk. From the corner of the corridor, Muriel Crestfall sat silently, her hands covering her mouth. Her eyes darted between Kalen and the blood on the floor. When Kalen finally looked at her, she flinched. Something in her gaze told him the truth was still deeper. That Alaric wasn't just acting on cruelty. He was acting on a plan. A plan she knew more about than she'd ever admitted. Kalen rose slowly, his voice low, dangerous, shaking with restrained fury. This ends soon, one way or another. And for the first time, Muriel couldn't hide her fear. The hospital had gone quiet after the chaos. Guards still lingered in the halls, whispering to each other about the brawl, about the soldier who'd nearly lost control. Blood still stained the tiles where Alaric Dravorn had been dragged away, his laughter echoing in Kalen's ears long after he was gone. Inside room 214, machines hummed, keeping Alohan Kaylee's tethered to life. Her small body was still, her breath shallow, but steady. Kalen sat beside her again, his hands trembling as he brushed her hair back. He whispered, broken and low, I almost lost you because of me. Behind him, the door opened. Detective Corvin Malrick entered, his expression set in stone. He closed the door firmly, as if sealing the room from the world outside. Stravik, he said evenly, we need to talk. Now. Kalen looked up, his face pale with exhaustion and fury. Unless you've come to tell me he's behind bars, I don't want to hear it. Corvin's eyes flicked toward Muriel Crestfall, who hovered just outside the doorway, her arms wrapped around herself, face streaked with tears. He nodded toward her. You're going to want to hear this. Both of you. Muriel stiffened, her fingers twisting the hem of her blouse. I've told you everything I know. No, Corvin cut her off sharply. You've told us the part that makes you look like a victim. But I've traced the money, Muriel. 6 months of steady deposits, all tied back to an account in your name. Care to explain why the man who put your daughter in ICU is living off your money? The color drained from her face. I was helping him get back on his feet. He lost his job. Corvin stepped closer, his voice sharp. Helping him? With $20,000? Regular, clockwork payments. He pulled a file from his coat, dropping it onto the table beside Alohan's bed. Pages fanned out, bank statements, signed transfers, receipts. Kalen's stomach churned. He looked at Muriel, his voice breaking. You paid him. Muriel's lips quivered. Kalen, please. Answer me. His voice cracked. Louder now, the soldier's bark slipping free. Tears welled in her eyes. Her knees buckled, and she sank in the chair across from him. I didn't know what else to do. You were gone. Every time she cried for you, I was the one left holding her. And when you came back, you'd leave again. She clung to you even when you weren't there. I couldn't compete with a ghost. Kalen's fists clenched. So you brought him into her life? I thought if Alohan hated you enough, if she saw you as the absent father, then she'd stop waiting at the window every night. She'd need me instead. I never wanted her hurt. I just wanted her to stop aching for you. Kalen staggered back, his breath ragged. So you paid him to hurt her? Muriel shook her head violently, sobbing. No, not to hurt her. Just to make her uncomfortable. To distance her from you. He promised it wouldn't go this far. He promised. Corvin's eyes hardened. And you believed him? A man with a history of violence, debts, and disappearances? You handed him the key to your daughter's life, and you let him twist it. The room was thick with silence. Only the beeping of Alohan's monitor filled the void. Kalen stared at Muriel as though she were a stranger. The woman he had once loved, the mother of his child, sat trembling before him, and every word from her lips felt like a dagger. Corvin's voice dropped lower, more dangerous. There's more. Because this wasn't just about you and your jealousy. Alaric's too arrogant for that. Too comfortable. He's not just your mistake, Muriel. He's part of something bigger. Something that used you as much as you used him. Muriel's head snapped up, her face pale. Her lips parted as if to speak, then closed again. Her silence was louder than confession. Kalen leaned forward, his voice a growl. Tell me what you're hiding. Right now. Muriel shook her head, tears spilling freely. If I tell you, it won't just destroy me. It'll destroy everything. The beeping of the monitor spiked. Alohan stirred faintly, her lips moving in restless sleep. Kalen gripped her hand, his chest aching. Destroy everything? His voice trembled. You already destroyed us. Corvin stepped between them, his tone razor sharp. Enough for tonight. Muriel, you've said more in silence than you realize. I'll drag the rest out of Alaric myself. But understand this. He leaned close, his eyes burning into hers. The next truth that comes out will break one of you. Him or you. Muriel collapsed into sobs, her hands covering her face. Kalen sat frozen, his heart tearing between fury and devastation. The betrayal he thought he'd understood was only the surface. The real enemy wasn't just Alaric. It wasn't just Muriel. It was the shadow binding them together. And the next confrontation would finally drag it into the light. The night pressed heavy over the city, rain streaking down the hospital windows like black ink. Kalen Stravik sat in silence beside his daughter's bed, his hand resting lightly over Alohan Kaylee's fragile fingers. The monitors beeped softly, a reminder she was still fighting, still holding on. The door swung open. Detective Corvin Malrick stepped inside, his expression carved from stone. He carried a thin folder in his hand, rain dripping from his coat. I spoke to him, Corvin said. His voice was even, but his eyes carried the weight of something darker. Alaric didn't break. Not completely, but he slipped again, and now I know what he's been hiding. Kalen rose slowly, tension crawling through his muscles. Tell me. Corvin placed the folder on the table. Alaric wasn't just cruel for the sake of it. He He was under orders. Someone was feeding him more than money. Someone was feeding him leverage, keeping him untouchable. Kalen's jaw tightened. His gaze flicked toward Muriel Crestfall, who lingered in the corner, her arms wrapped around herself. Her face was pale, her eyes bloodshot. Corvin's words landed like bullets. "It was you, Muriel." Muriel flinched. "No." Corvin pulled out the documents, spreading them across the table. Bank transfers, phone records, and one more thing, a signed affidavit from an earlier custody petition you filed. You were building a case against Kalen, but you needed proof he was unfit. You needed Eloan broken enough to say it herself. Kalen's world tilted. His chest caved as he stared at Muriel. "You used her." His voice cracked with disbelief. "You put her through this hell just to take her from me?" Tears spilled down Muriel's face. "I didn't mean for her to get hurt like this. I just wanted the court to see you weren't stable, that she'd be better off with me. I never thought he'd go that far." Kalen's fury surged. "Never thought?" He locked her in a shed. He fractured her skull. He left her to die. His voice thundered, shaking the walls. "And you paid him to do it." Muriel sobbed, collapsing into the chair. "I thought it was controlled. I thought it was just enough to make her resent you, to sway the judge. But he enjoyed it. He went further. Too far." Kalen's body trembled. He turned away, his hand pressed against the glass of the window, rain streaking down the pane like tears he refused to shed. "You didn't just betray me," he whispered. "You betrayed her." Corvin's voice was sharp, cutting through the suffocating silence. "There's more." Alaric admitted he only agreed because he was promised protection. He said if things went wrong, he had a shield. Someone with power. Someone who wanted you out of the picture as much as Muriel did. Kalen spun, his eyes narrowing. "Ooh." Corvin hesitated, then dropped the final page on the table. A signature. A name Kalen hadn't spoken in years. His chest locked. His heart seemed to stop. The name was Senator Adrian Stravik, his own father. Kalen staggered back, the blood draining from his face. "No." His voice cracked like broken glass. "That's impossible." Corvin's gaze was steady. He funded the accounts. He shielded Alaric. And he backed Muriel's custody claim. Because the last thing a rising senator needed was a son branded as unstable, a liability tied to a fragile child. The room spun. Kalen gripped the bed rail to steady himself, his world unraveling. Memories flooded back. His father's cold distance, the way he dismissed Eloan as a distraction, the endless pressure to choose duty over family. It all clicked too perfectly. Muriel's sobs broke the silence. He said it was for Eloan, that she'd be better off without a father who disappeared for months, who lived with blood on his hands. I believed him. I believed him because I wanted it too. Kalen's chest heaved. He stared at her, then at the folder, then at his daughter, fragile and bruised but still fighting for life. His voice dropped to a whisper, jagged with pain. "You all used her. You turned my little girl into a weapon." The monitor beeped steadily beside them, a fragile heartbeat cutting through the devastation. Corvin's tone was grave. "Tomorrow, the senator's name goes public. And when it does, the storm will hit harder than anything you've ever faced on the battlefield." Kalen lowered his head, his hand tightening around Eloan's. His eyes burned with fury and heartbreak. "This war," he whispered, "isn't over." Dawn crept across the horizon, gray light spilling through the hospital windows. For Kalen Stravik, it felt like the longest night of his life had only sharpened into another battle. He stood in the hallway, staring out at the city skyline, his reflection fractured in the glass. Behind him, the steady rhythm of machines kept Eloan Kaylee's tethered to the world. Each beep reminded him of why he hadn't completely broken. Each fragile breath reminded him of what was left to protect. The door opened. Detective Corvin Malrick entered, his face lined with exhaustion but sharpened with resolve. He held a thin folder under his arm. "It's official. The senator's name is out. Reporters will be at the courthouse by noon. He'll try to bury it, but the evidence is solid." Kalen's jaw tightened. "He won't bury it. Not this time." Corvin studied him carefully. "Are you ready for what comes with this? He's not just a father. He's a senator. He'll fight like a cornered animal. Kaylin's gaze never left the skyline. Then I'll fight harder. A soft sound drew his attention back to the room. Aloan stirred, her eyelids fluttering. Slowly, painfully, her eyes opened. Her lips moved weakly. Dad? Kaylin rushed to her side, his hand trembling as he clasped hers. I'm here, baby girl. I'm not going anywhere. Her small fingers curled around his. Tears blurred his vision. For the first time, hope cracked through the despair. But the door creaked again. This time it wasn't Corvin. Muriel Crestfall stepped inside, her face pale, her shoulders sagging. She looked at Aloan, tears streaking her cheeks. I'm so sorry, she whispered, her voice breaking. I never wanted you hurt. Kaylin's body tensed. He rose slowly, his eyes cold. Sorry doesn't erase the blood on her skin. Sorry doesn't fix the nights she spent begging for light in the dark. Muriel's sobs shook her. I was weak. Adrian told me you'd never be here for her, that your world would always choose war. I believed him. I thought I was protecting her by making her hate you. Kaylin's jaw trembled, fury and heartbreak colliding. You didn't protect her. You broke her, and you broke me. Corvin stepped forward, his tone sharp. Muriel, your statement is already filed. You'll testify, but after that, you'll face your own charges. If you want any chance of ever seeing your daughter again, you'll cooperate fully. Do you understand? Muriel nodded, sobbing silently. A knock echoed on the doorframe. 2 federal agents entered, crisp suits and stern faces. Between them walked Senator Adrian Stravik. His presence filled the room like a shadow. His tailored suit was immaculate, but his eyes carried fire. Kaylin, Adrian said smoothly, as though greeting an acquaintance, not a son. You don't understand the world you're playing in. Everything I've built, everything was for stability, for control. And you, with your instability, your absence, your weakness, you were the threat. Kaylin's fist shook. So you destroyed me by destroying her? He pointed at Aloan, his voice cracking with rage. Your own granddaughter? Adrian's jaw tightened, but his eyes were cold. Collateral. Pain builds strength. I was protecting her future. Kaylin stepped forward, his voice a roar that shook the sterile room. No, you weren't protecting her. You were protecting yourself. Your campaign. Your spotless image. You made her bleed so you wouldn't. The agents moved as if to restrain Kaylin, but Corvin held up a hand. Let him speak. Kaylin's chest heaved. He looked at Aloan, her eyes wide, frightened but focused on him. Then he turned back to Adrian. I fought wars for strangers. I bled for men I didn't know. And the one war I should have been fighting was here, against you. Adrian's lips curled in disdain. You'll regret crossing me. Corvin stepped forward, snapping cuffs around the senator's wrists. No, Senator. You'll regret underestimating the law. Adrian didn't resist. He only stared at Kaylin, his eyes promising that the war wasn't truly over. Then the agents let him out, the door shutting behind them. Silence hung in the room, broken only by the steady beep of Aloan's monitor. Kaylin sank back into the chair beside her bed, his body trembling with exhaustion. He took her hand again, brushing his thumb over her fragile fingers. It's over now, he whispered. The war is over. For you. Aloan blinked slowly, her lips curving into the faintest smile. Home. Kaylin bent down, pressing his forehead to hers. Yes, baby girl. I'm bringing you home. Tears slid down his face as he realized it wasn't vengeance that mattered anymore. It was her survival, her healing. The war against Alaric, Muriel, and Adrian had ended in chains and disgrace. But the war to rebuild Aloan's trust, her safety, her childhood, that was only beginning. And Kaylin Stravik was ready to fight it.